This is the Family Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Dai Manuel for the first time. Thank you for being on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. How are you doing tonight?
Doing fantastic. Great to be here.
So, thank you for being on the show. I want to let people know we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You can see that little icon up there. It says "Listen on Newsly." For those of you listening or watching, if you use that coupon code Ghost, you can check that out for free for 1 month. We will be on Newsly later tonight with the audio only version of the podcast. And we also want to let people know that we're actually at episode 1020 of the Family Electric Ghost podcast, tracking that on Apple Podcasts since 2016. And we do have your website, daimanuel.com, and that'll be fully clickable when we're published. And you'll be able to click through on that on any platform. And we're all on all the major platforms. You'll be able to check that out. So again, thank you for being on the show tonight.
Pleasure. It's an honor to be here, really. And 1020 episodes. Like, wow, that's incredible, man. Incredible.
Yeah, we kind of fell into podcasting back in 2016. The story was that we're a musician and we're in our home studio, our bedroom studio. Yeah. We're a synthesizer player. We're a producer. Cool. We play a lot of other instruments. But some guy found me named Rock Tunes in 2016, and we were on a platform called Spearman, which was an iOS app for podcasts, and it was only on the phone. And he had me do an interview, and then we liked each other so much that we ended up doing a show together for 6 months talking about music. And then after that, I decided to do my own show because he couldn't do it anymore. And then I started interviewing musicians. And then we expanded to poets, then authors, then to, painters and filmmakers. And then we said, you know what? People who are CEOs and business owners, they're creative too. So we opened it up to life coaches and therapists and all types of people, mediums, anybody that we thought was interesting. And that's where we are today. We talk to like anybody that is a creative type of person that's doing service or has an idea that is interesting and should be talked about.
What have you learned in 1,000 episodes? What's been the biggest takeaways?
Well, I think it's a masterclass on humanity. Yeah. The way I look at it, the reason I survived in a world where podcasters end after 12 episodes is that I looked at it as every time I talk to somebody, I'm learning something. And if I look at it as trying to find the metrics of being the best and the biggest on some chart, that wasn't the point. Because I'm a musician and I'm a software designer. I have other things I do. Wow. But I do this because it actually helps my brand. And as a writer, the more people I interact with, it gives me more material in my head to write with. And so I get benefits from doing this regardless of whether they give me directly money or numbers. I've gotten opportunities by talking to people to do things I would have never thought I could do. So, just doing the show and showing up gives me opportunities to do all kinds of projects that people just come out of nowhere and ask me. Well, not out of nowhere, because I have this big Rolodex of people I've talked to. And so then they ask, well, I need music for this, or I want to do this, or you can talk to this person. So I get opportunity. So the opportunity is just be showing up. That's the way I learned.
I just got to say it's impressive because I've just recently in the last 2 weeks launched my own podcast finally. After being on everybody else's podcast, I was like, I should probably do my own. And I realized there's a lot of effort that goes into that, but I can only imagine 1,000 episodes. It's so awesome because you're creating this amazing content for all of us to consume, based on your generosity, but also it's just podcasts are such a wonderful medium to not only be inspired and motivated, but to learn. And I often find it's done in a fun way. So I'm looking to you for inspiration. If I ever get stuck on an episode, I'll just be like, well, geez, if I was up near 1,000. Gosh.
The way I look at it is I treat it like, I like fusion, but I'm an experimental artist. So I kind of live in the present. I do a lot of live recording. I do a lot of
Okay.
kind of like jazz type influenced recording, which is point in time. So that's why I'm a live podcaster. I tried it doing edited podcast, and then I found, well, I can't talk to as many people if I have to spend so much time on one episode trying to make it perfect. In
Yeah.
the same way as I treat my music, is like sometimes I'll go with an early take, even if it has errors, because it sounds more authentic. And so I made a decision that if I do a live podcast and I have a real conversation with another human being, kind of like oral history of the human race, is learning from talking to somebody without trying to make it a perfect scripted exercise.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
actually learn something because you're not trying to make something into some kind of infomercial, but you
Absolutely.
actually are talking and getting a real experience. And that's what I try to bring. And that's what I learned is like trying to make it perfect is not the goal.
Yeah.
Trying to learn something is the goal.
Well, I love it. There's a Japanese philosophy called Katsugi, which basically refers to the beauty and imperfection, right? And it's kind of neat because they have
Yeah.
pottery that's broken, and when they put it back together, they use like this gold leaf, right? So it looks like there's all these gold cracks, and it's this idea, but there's the beauties in the cracks, the imperfections, right? And so I love your approach.
Yeah.
I think that's
That's the
so
way.
awesome.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And
It's
so what
like
now?
why does
What's
something
the
like the
goal?
Rolling Stones that go on Main Street? Why does it? Well, the goal today, well, with the podcast is
Yeah.
eventually, to take it on the road, is to
Oh
take the idea
yeah.
with the podcast is after all these episodes, eventually take it on the road to the country or the person that I'm working with and actually be where they are and kind of follow around and get a sponsor to do a higher level podcast
Yeah.
where you kind of be like the day in the life. You film the day leading up to where you show the person doing what they do. You film that, then you do the interview. So if it's a musician, you film them writing the song, then you film playing the song, then you interview them about the song. If it's an artist, you film them, watch them create the painting, put it in the gallery, then talk to you about it. So it's like that's the bigger idea of what I want to do, pitch to the next level. But until I get to that, I keep on doing what I'm doing until I get to that step. But yeah, it's just trying to turn it into something to the next level. But you still get, you have these dreams of what you want to do, and then you go with what you're doing and you build it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, man. Well, my hat's off to you because I think it's just very impressive to be able to stick with that kind of diligence, but just the frequency and consistency. And so it's a great example of it. Man, no excuses. Just go, man. But so right now, what
Yeah.
is sort of the
But
biggest
sometimes you
outlet?
don't feel good.
All right. Oh, why?
Oh, the best outlet. Well, I mean, sometimes you don't feel good, and I mean that's the hard thing. Is like, how do you make yourself, want to do something on a regular basis? And a lot of it is just like it's actually just showing up. Like my grandpa used to say, like a coal miner, you might not want to go into that hole in the ground, but you kind of know you have to do it. And it's not like it's obligation, but once you figure out that you have something and you've got it to a certain degree, like it feels like it just becomes, to me, it becomes a routine that, and I do like talking to people. So like the same reason why I still play music, where when I was 17, I picked up the keys and I've been playing ever since I'm 56. I knew a lot of people when I started, they gave up because they wanted to be an overnight sensation. They wanted to be in the top 10. But did they really like playing? Well, if they like playing, they'd still be playing now, but they're not.
Yeah.
So they really didn't enjoy being a musician. They just wanted something else.
Gosh.
That's what I kind of tell people. Like you kind of do it because why do you do something?
Yeah. Well, why do you do anything, right? It's that emotional connection that we have. It's not the easiest of things to articulate, but man, when you're aligned with that energetically, it's like, just get out of my way, right? It's just like, where it's amazing how excited and how much energy we can produce for ourselves when it is in an area that we find joy or happiness or excitement. And, that whole idea of the flow state, right? When we get into that sort of mode where things feel effortless. And it's
Yeah.
not really that it's effortless. It's just that we're enjoying it so much we lose track of time, right? It's just it's a beautiful place to find oneself. That's for sure.
It's also like, if you,
Mhm.
if you think about an athlete that gets to, like, a basketball player can do a 3-point shot. Well, that wasn't overnight.
Yep.
That was through,
I
like,
know.
probably 10,000 hours of doing that till they can do it on command. It's the same thing with a
Mhm.
musician. It's like they get on stage and they know that bass. They don't have to look at it, right? Because they played it 10,000 hours and they know everything. They could be distracted and still hit the same thing. Like there's just going to be, so it becomes like muscle memory once you do something enough that it
Yeah.
becomes like rote, that you know how to do it. It's easy and it just becomes like a natural. So I think like what I've tried to do with things is like once I get into that flow state of I've done it enough times that I'm confident and I trust in myself what you can do. It's like once you get into something that you really find enjoyable, you do have to enjoy it. Like if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
And
right.
so it's like it's part of it is like so you can't force yourself to do something that you're really not meant to do. Like if you're not meant to do it, then it's not for you, right?
Mhm.
But when you find out that you found something that you got your groove on, you're in that
Yeah.
flow state, you're in the present moment, and you love it, and you're that public speaker, you're the poet, you're a hip hop guy, you're a CEO, you're a CFO. You go from one company to the next, building company. That's what you like to do. So that's what you're
Yes.
going to keep on doing.
It's good. I like it. I like it. And clearly you found something you love doing. And so what does the typical themes look like when you're having conversations? Because I can imagine with such a variety of types of people, do you notice that any themes keep emerging?
Well, what I try to use is the theme of creativity. Since I'm a musician,
Yeah.
I try to weave music into every podcast
Yeah.
in terms of the idea. I think everybody can understand music. Everybody has like a soundtrack to their lives.
Yeah.
And a lot of the concepts in music creation are similar to anything that you do.
Mm.
So the idea in music, one of the concepts I like to use is the happy accident. So what does that mean? So like if you're doing something and you're creative and a lot of people try to be perfect.
Yeah.
And if they something happens that wasn't planned, they don't know how to deal with it, right? So if it wasn't in the plan, they'll ignore it. They don't know how to riff off of it. They kind of get thrown off. So it's the kind of person like if they're
Mhm.
playing a song and they miss the next note, they start the whole thing over again.
Right.
Versus a fusion jazz player, if they hit a different chord, the whole band goes with that new chord and rewrites the song.
That's cool.
So it becomes an opportunity instead of a failure. So
Right.
it's like that you can use that analogy, even though it's music, in everything
Mm.
you do.
I like that. That's I well, it just also gives you a much more positive outlook on making mistakes, right? I think that when you think about it, I mean, I know for myself growing up, I used to handle criticism really poorly, especially, getting things wrong. I'd feel so guilty about it, beat myself up about it. But when I did get that shift into the idea of stop pursuing perfection in favor of finding progression, you know, that's when all of a sudden I found things actually became a lot more enjoyable, like, and so I can appreciate that's really what you're speaking to a lot. And what else? I'm just really fascinated because with a show of this many episodes, like, do you find that the audience reaches out with questions or ideas on the types of content or subject matter they like to hear referred to? I can just imagine logistically, there's a lot to sort of sift through, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, what we've done is, again, we try to kind of show that everybody is creative, whether you're a
Right.
musician
Yeah.
or not. And so the
Mhm.
idea is creativity is about like vulnerability, and
Yes.
creativity is about pushing boundaries. And it's not
Mhm.
about necessarily cloning what exists. It's sometimes
Mhm.
pushing to the cutting edge. And when you're on that cutting edge or bleeding edge, well, you're going to get criticism. And so a
Yeah.
lot of people, it factors really good when you're talking to therapists and life coaches, because what do they talk about?
Mhm.
They talk about people who have imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
people who have limiting beliefs. Well, guess what? Musicians are full of that. When you talk to a singer-songwriter and you actually meet them and you check how many songs that they have not actually shown anybody, right? And they have imposter syndrome. Some people who are really big and you think they're so put together and they know what they're doing, they got a lot of fear. There's a lot of people that you wouldn't expect to be. They're not always who they seem to be, right? There's a lot of going on with people where they don't trust themselves, and there's a lot of that psychology. And so I found is like, well, this is going on in music, and it actually goes on in other forms. And so I found a way to parallel. And when I first started doing it, people were saying, well, how can a musician talk to a CEO and talk to a CFO and talk to all these different people? And then I started threading the needle, and then people keep on coming to talk to me because they saw that I thread the needle. And the idea is the life has a lot of parallels. Life has a lot of things that are cross, and a lot of people like to stay in lanes. What I find is the world isn't really like that. The world is things aren't always in their lane. People cross into other lanes all the time, and people want to act like they don't, but they do. And so I try to stay in that zone, and people appreciate that. That's actually what what life is. Is it's not always, clear cut. It's a lot of gray.
Sure. Well, and also I appreciate that, that idea of staying in our lane. Well, we're constantly merging, in and out of these lanes. At least that's the way I live my life, and sometimes you got to slow down before you merge, right? And sometimes you got to speed up, but either way, always moving forward. So that's always been the goal. I love that little analogy though, or metaphor, I think that's great.
I think like when you think about like how you manage change in your life,
yeah,
it is about like not being scared to get out of a routine. Like you might be in a routine, but that routine might be codependency, and that is something you're used to, but it's not really moving you forward. It's not moving the needle forward, right? So sometimes what's comfortable and what's easy is actually what's stopping you. And it's actually not so easy because eventually you hit a breaking point. And when you hit that breaking point, you realize you got to talk to the therapist, got to find the coach, you got to go to the doctor. Like you hit something because you weren't addressing that person in the mirror. Like you weren't dealing with the limiting belief, you weren't dealing with imposter syndrome, you weren't dealing with the pains that your body is telling you you're ignoring it. And eventually you have to address it. And I think once you realize that you can't be perfect, and you're always going to be learning till you're not here, and you always have another day to fix something, you always have another day to work something out, until you're not here. And if you treat things like that, then you know that you can constantly work toward making your life worth living.
Yeah, if we all thought change was easy, I think we'd do a lot more of it. And change is usually challenging. It's hard, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
But how many times do we work towards something significant in our lives? And if it was easy, I don't know if we'd appreciated it as much,
Yeah, I think a lot of times, like, if you have like lifestyle habits and you're kind of into that habit, and then you have to start to question, is this habit actually, affected? How is it affecting me? Like I'm constantly doing the same thing, but then I'm expecting a different result. Right? Like I'm constantly going toward toxic relationships, and I wonder why it's toxic. It's not gonna really. It's not. It's like maybe the real reason is like you never addressed the toxicity that's within.
Yeah.
Like so, if you don't address the toxicity within, it's like the law of attraction. So if you're a prickly person, you're gonna probably bring prickly people to you. If you're a person that's like more like easy to be around, then you're gonna draw more positivity. So it's like in Buddhism, I'm a Buddhist, and so if you feel like this idea like law of cause and effect, if I put out positivity is going to come back. If I put out negativity is going to come back. But I keep on thinking I'm going to be putting out these negative things and I'm going to get something positive. Well, that doesn't really work.
No. I appreciate how you're sort of I guess framing that, because there's that part of our psychology they call the reticular activation system, right? And it's, people sometimes wonder, they're out driving around, all of a sudden they've got an idea in their mind that they want a new type of car, a certain model, a certain color. And all of a sudden, once you've set that intention and it sifts into our subconscious, all of a sudden we start noticing that specific car on the road. And we think, wow, is this just all of a sudden magically appearing? Everybody else is buying that car right now. It's not. It's just that we've tuned in our subconscious and aligned it with the conscious, saying, hey, this is something that I want. I'm thinking that I want. And so the subconscious starts to help us become more aware of it as it shows up. And some people call this law of manifestation, and sure, we can refer to that too. But at the end of the day, we still got to take some actions. You want to get the new car. Well, you got to go out and get it. Right? You got to go either buy it or steal it. I wouldn't recommend that, but you just got to go get the car. And but this is a beautiful thing, because it's a wonderful example of how we can quite literally start to program our mind to be more susceptible to certain types of information and stimulus. And especially, as you were saying, towards the positive, right? Like, well, if we're constantly putting positive out, well, it also means we're probably tuned into positive. So we will become more receptive and start to recognize the positive more so than maybe the negative. But again, it's an act of conscious effort a lot of the time, because you have to set the intention. It's like, I recognize I'm a little bit negative, or I've got this sort of default negative emotion I seem to go to all the time when this type of situation arises. Like, oh, geez, I'm out driving my car and that dude just cut me off, and you get a little bit of road rage. And I noticed that about myself. I'd have a very short fuse when it came to driving. So I had to really become mindful and aware of some of those emotions that would start to percolate up, right? And because unless you're aware of it, you can't change it.
Yeah. It's like that looking glass. Yeah, it's that looking glass kind of analysis that I was really into it. The Victorian poets always mentioned the idea. In the looking glass, it's the mirror. Yeah. And you look in the mirror, you see the other you. Well, the other you is just a variation of you. So that could be the angry young man inside of you, right? And when you're a poet, you look in the mirror and you see that and you write about it. That means you accept it and you analyze it. So when you're type of creative person, you look inside and you find the flaws, or you find the refracted mirror, the broken glass that is you, and you start to address it. You address that there is some brokenness or there is some problem, and you try to figure out like why. You start to ask why. You start to challenge yourself and say, well, what does it have to be that way? How am I perceived? How do I perceive myself? And then you start to actually, am I that prickly person? Am I that person that says the glass is half empty, instead of half full? So like you start to figure out your trigger, like you said. So the road rage, you have a way to respond to it if you recognize it.
That's right.
And I think when you start to, grow as a person, it doesn't really matter the age. You could start to grow at any age if you address these things. Any age you can solve it, and you can do the reprogramming, of yourself to change. You're not like, oh, I'm too late to save me. It's really not. It's really how much work are you willing to do?
That's right. And I know sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming, especially when we're just getting started. I tend to find a lot of people I connect with initially, they're people that have the best of intentions, that are feeling like, there's something in my life I need to change. And what I mean by that, it comes more out of necessity. Right. And it's, as an example, I've been in the fitness space for like almost 30 years, helping people with fitness. And I got to say, there's a good chunk of people that would come to me because they've just gone to the doctor and the doctor's like, yo, we've got some issues here. And if we don't deal with these now, you're going to be coming back here a lot more frequently. And it's not going to be a fun trip to the doctor's office unless you start doing something about this. And so that coming out of necessity, out of a fear that something worse is going to happen if they don't start to be proactive with their health. Unfortunately, and I say this unfortunately, like that might be enough to get you started, but that fear will subside. And when that fear subsides, what's going to keep you going? And I think a lot of us don't tend to think about what's next, or how do I actually create this into a lifestyle where I prioritize my health versus just prioritizing my health because the doctor says I better, I'm going to die, you know? And because that's the difference between starting, stopping, and continuing, right?
Yeah, I think you have to do something that's sustainable. And what I find with people is they go through phases and they go through fads and they go through, steps. But my whole thing is like, 12 step is like, you know what, you have to actually do this for the rest of your life. And like if you're an alcoholic, you have to have an incremental, doable plan that works for the every day until you're not here. It's not going to end at some step. You have to have something that is actually achievable. And that's where a lot of people make the mistake is like, if you're going to be, on a diet, like if you're just going to go through tons of fad diets until you figure out what is it that is sustainable in your life and what is it that's foundational in your life that you have to actually work at every day. And if you fall off the plan, you don't have to go back to zero.
No,
there's like the jazz musician. You don't start the song again. You say, okay, I made a misstep, but I don't have to like give up and then eat every cookie in a box because it fell off.
Well, I was just thinking about something that you just said there, and I wonder what's the best way to sort of put this. Like, I don't want to offend anybody, of course, or trigger anybody, but health is an interesting thing because it's such a subjective term, right? We can try to quantify it and qualify it, but really at the end of the day, we each have a different way of describing what health is to us. And why I'm bringing this up is because if you have a clear understanding or at least a belief around what health is to you, and what I mean is anybody that's listening or watching this, like you specifically, what does healthy mean to you? And then what does healthy not only mean to you right now, but 20 years from now, what would healthy also mean or look like? And I think this is really important because this is an exercise I encourage everyone to do. Is like start thinking about your future self at 10, 15, 20 year out where you are currently. What level of health will you need to live the best version of you or to live the kind of life that you want to be continuing to live then? Because sometimes we make decisions not, reflective of what we want our future self to be like, but rather what we're dealing with right now. And, for me, a big part of why I'm healthy or I maintain a certain level of health is because I know when I get into my golden years, in my 80s and 90s, I want to be still having a very high quality of life. I don't want that quality of life to be very depreciated to the point where I'm in and out of hospitals. I have very poor mobility, so I can't even navigate, as simple walking to the grocery store and back. So there's certain aspects that are important to me when I'm 80 and 90. So I have to ask myself, am I honoring that type of health now, today? Right? And this sometimes gives us a little bit greater understanding and appreciation for prioritizing health now, because our future self will be much more fun and it's going to have a lot more enjoyable time because we put the work in. We've had that lifestyle from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. It's not about instant gratification. It's about the long-term vitality that we're going to gain and quality of life.
Yeah, I think a lot of times is people do it because they want to go to, some wedding and they want to look good at the wedding or they want to look good for the party. And, it's a very short-term goal. If you have a short-term goal, then you're probably going to fall off because once you hit the wedding, then you don't care, right? And once you hit this this 20-year reunion, then you don't care. It's like, but that's not going to be very sustainable. Like what you're saying is like that they're actually having a plan. Like why is it that you do it, right? So like I have talked to other people that have mentioned what you've said, that like you're really only gonna stay on something if it's a long term like reason. Like why do you want to lose weight? What's the reason? And some people, like when you go to a weight loss person and they hear that the reason is it's just for this event, and they're kind of questions like, is that really what you want to do, or is there some bigger goal than that, right? And and some people might not challenge that, and other people will. It depends on where they are. But like if you have that bigger long term vision, and that's really more of a holistic piece, because a lot of times people look at something and there's multiple legs, right? If you just look at the nutrition, right, but you don't look at somebody's mindset, or you don't look at like what's like in their heart kind of set. Like it's not all just the physicality of it. I've run into people that get 6-pack abs, look great, but then they in their mind they did not see themselves looking like that, even though they physically looked like that. They still had a problem, and then they didn't feel good about themselves, and they thought that getting to that physical state would make them feel good, but they didn't solve the mental anguish that they had.
Well said. Well said. And you're absolutely correct. It's holistic health, right? So we're looking at all aspects of our health, not just the physical, because you're absolutely correct, but sometimes, and this is just for those out there, like you may not have all these parts figured out. But again, to speak to what you were talking to earlier, we're not looking for perfection. We're not looking to have everything right down to the last T crossed and the last I dotted. It doesn't have to be so meticulously planned and executed on. Even the fact that we are just taking some space to do something for ourselves right now that prioritizes but also honors our expectation of health. That in itself is just a wonderful act of self-care. And I'm the kind of guy that I'm like, don't worry about how long you do it. Don't worry about how hard you're doing it. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Just do the activity. And then when you're done, celebrate that you just did it. Because I think Nike's great. What a slogan, right? Just do it. And that's supposed to get us off our tush to get going. Well, I'm way happier for people to say, I just did it, because now we're acknowledging and celebrating the completion of the act. You know what I mean? Like it's a different way of looking at things. So just go through the motions, because you will appreciate yourself so much more when you're honoring your health. And just a quick note, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but in the last decade or so, there's been a lot of talk around this idea of what's called health span, not lifespan. Lifespan, from what we know, it refers to longevity and how long we might live in our lifetime. But health span refers to however long we live, but with high standard of health. So again, sort of back to this idea, science might be helping us live longer, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to help us live well.
With the quality.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so,
you can live like if you live to 120 and 20 years are in some facility where you can't move.
Oh yeah.
What's the point of that?
Exactly. And that's something that I like.
What's the point of living to like that kind of life?
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. Like, and it's recognizing that if we understand this intention of living well for a long time, like a certain quality of life, and we want to maintain that standard for as long as possible, you'll find that you start doing certain things, taking certain actions. Oh, sorry, excuse me. And keeping track of do you know what I mean? Like it's that idea of when you have that clear vision, like you were sharing, right? When we're sharing that and open about that and clear on what that looks like, you just start doing the things. It's not like you're trying to even make a list of things to do anymore. You just start doing them and living as if. That is a beautiful place to be, because that's where things just happen. We talked about the flow state earlier, that idea of doing things, and it just feels effortless. Yeah. Well, when you get to living your best life, that's how it's going to feel a lot of the time. Now, not always, But a lot of the time it's just going to feel like you're just doing your life, honoring certain aspects that are important to you. And it's amazing. It's nice to be in that place, but it takes a little bit of time to get there.
I think it's about balance, because so many things today are about like in balance. So many people do things and they go to one extreme to the next. So like just a lot of times you see stuff on social media, it's like it's some kind of quick fix. It's very extreme. It says only do this, only eat this, only do X, Y, Z. And a lot of things in life is like, hey, we're omnivores. Right? You know, so maybe if you have a little bit of everything and you're in balance, that might work better. Not to push down vegetarians, but like if you see like, well, human beings are kind of built to do this, and you decide that you only want to do that. Well, if you don't take care of some things, you might get deficient. So the idea is like, if you have more balance, mental balance, physical balance, spiritual balance, you know, heart balance, and people say, well, it's not all about just physical. There's other things that are very important. Legs, in being a person that's kind of into creative mindset, is like, I believe in the muse. I believe in the kind of being a channel to channel what's around you, which means you have to be kind of empathetic of what's going on inside and outside, and be able to read the room. And then not only do you have to read the room, you have to read yourself. Some people don't, you know, there's people pleasers. But then they don't please themselves. So that's not going to work. They might think that that's a good thing, but then you're out of balance. To me, the common kind of thing, which is a kind of Buddhist Eastern philosophy, is like finding equilibrium, finding balance, finding kind of the sweet spot where you can, you know, get the noise out, have a place where you can shake things off and be able to kind of restore yourself, and not going to extremes without finding a way to restore yourself and shake it off. Where we live in Western society, thinks you can go to these extremes. I can stay up all night, or I can drink tons of coffee and do this. I can use this to get this. And it's always some kind of pushing your body, and like, whoa, I don't have to carry, I can just push it. And I was in college as a kid, staying up all night, drinking coffee, drinking Jolt Cola, doing all this, you know, doing stuff. Well, that's not good for you. That really doesn't put you in a mindset. Did you really learn it by cramming it? Or should you have kind of really done the work to know it? You know, so it ends up being a cost one way or the other.
And actually, you know, to speak to the balance piece, because I think you're actually going to appreciate what I have to say now, being that you're a musician, okay, and they're creative. But I invite some people that are challenged by this idea of balance, because I don't know, if there's been a lot of my life I've been seeking balance, and just when I think I found it, sure enough, something happens and I'm out of balance again. So it feels like this constant striving for balance. And as soon as you find it, it's like Neverland, right? With Peter Pan, it's like, yeah, just follow that star and head on till morning. I'm like, well, it's morning. I didn't find it yet. But my case in point is, what about trying to find more harmony between the different areas of our life?
So your harmony is not exactly balanced, and maybe that's the better thing, because a lot of times, in music, like, we work with disharmony, and we look with, you know, noise, and we work with, you know, things that are, you know, distortions and dissonance. So a lot of times in a song, we have dissonance, and then we have harmony to kind of show the, you know, the accentuate differences. So we'll have parts of the song that are very quiet to accentuate other parts, and parts that are dissonant or loud or jarring. And there's a reason, because we're trying to draw attention to different things. And we could do things where everything's just the same. There's a lot of stuff today that has the same pattern. You know, it's like a club banger. It got the same pattern going over and over. Very perfect. But it doesn't have the movements. It doesn't have the changes. It doesn't have the sweet spots. It doesn't really move like a song structure. It's more like a banger. And, you know, I'm a child of the 70s. I'm more into songs that have movements, because I say a song tells a story, and a story isn't all about the action. It's about the buildup. It's about the prologue. It's about the epilogue, and songs are the same way. But we've kind of gotten to this commercial stage where people just want to have the part that's banging, the part that's real. And I'd like to play with the dissonance and the quiet and the build up and the cacophony and the decrescendo and the crescendo. So I want all those elements, but then people say, well, you can only do it in 2 minutes. So then you can't fit those elements in. So all you have is the banger.
Fair. It's so
and
interesting.
That's kind of like surface. It's very surface and it's satisfying, but it's not really deep. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, I like how you described all that, and this idea of striving for harmony, because there's going to be areas that maybe feel not very harmonious, right? And I think we go through phases in our lives where that happens, but that's again part of the growth, because we've all acknowledged, everybody will agree to this. It's because it's a cliche now. We talk about, the grow zone happens when you're outside of your comfort zone, right? Like you will experience discomfort and that will force you into a state of evolution, or you'll evolve and grow. Well, that means we have to sign up to feel uncomfortable, right? And so some of us are very averse to that. Or we get, we feel somewhat unsure of ourselves because we base everything on a past experience. We say, oh, I've tried that before. Like, you mentioned the word diet before.
Yeah, I mean,
like how many people have tried a diet, right? And I'm saying diet, not scientific idea of diet, but idea of releasing weight, and you fail. And so all of a sudden you start thinking and you start to believe, well, why bother trying another diet? I'm just going to fail like I did the last one. And so we start to almost have these self-fulfilling prophecies. And as you said at the beginning of our conversation, those limiting beliefs, right? But they all form from somewhere. And it's usually based on an experience. But you know what the cool thing about living life is? Every day is an opportunity to prove yourself wrong. What I mean by that is these limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
You just got to say, is that true? And then go and prove yourself wrong. Okay? Because you can.
Yeah.
You can.
Well, the thing is, like when you're creating something, a lot of times people today, they clone and they sample, so they take something they know was a hit. This is the kind of thing in the industry today. I can take a beat and I know it was a hit because it was a hit in 1972. It was a hit, so I can clone that, sample that, put it on my song, change something about it, and I know it's going to bang and it's going to hit the algorithm. I'm going to get tons of views. I'm going to get tons of listens. It's harder to go and write that new piece of work that has no history. You have no idea. There's nobody else that did it, so you can't prove it will make any money at all. A lot of people are scared of doing that, so they just don't clone or sample what has been done. I tend to be the kind of musician that's like, I will create the beat from scratch, regardless of whether it was done before or not.
Nice.
And so that has a high chance of failure, and in terms of marketing failure. But if the right person hears it, it's a different situation. And there are situations where you could create something, and even if it didn't get 1 million views, I've had this happen to me where, Grammy-winning producer heard my work. Wow. It was only in that post, maybe 100 people viewed it, but he was one of them. So it proves that having 1 million, doing the same algorithm would have hit 1 million, wouldn't have drawn him in, because he would have said, I heard that before.
Exactly.
So sometimes the overall metric is not the overall thing that's going to get you the result. It's like who hears it, and putting it in the world allowed that person to hear it. So sometimes the law of attraction will bring that person to you, and being fearful of putting it out there is what's stopping you from actually having that connection.
Sometimes you just got to ship it. Seth Godin, one of my favorites, he used to say that all the time. Just ship it, man. Just don't wait for it to be perfect. Just put it out there,
Throw it on a wall. Throw it on the wall. It's like this throw it on the wall philosophy. That's what SoundCloud is to a lot of us. Is like that's the place we throw our stuff on the wall. We get an underground response, and then from there we'll push it to the bigger places. But in that area, we have a lot of diehard music fans that dislike music, right? And they're willing to listen to things that people haven't heard. And you get a lot of diehard fans, and they give you comments, and they'll go in and say at minute 2:35, this is this, and it's really good feedback. It's like a beta reader. If you're an author, there are things called beta readers, And, SoundCloud gives us beta listeners who listen to our work and then tell us what's working and what's not working. And then from there, we can say, hey, this is actually has some potential and we can push it further. But if you didn't have a place like that to throw it to, you wouldn't know. And I think a lot of people, they don't hold their hand up in the meeting. And I'm a software designer in my day job. And I've been around, young guys coming in, and they'll after the meeting, they'll come to me in the hall and tell me the idea. And I said, well, you should have said that in the meeting. Yeah, I know you're saying to it now because you feel comfortable. You don't feel comfortable saying it in the meeting. And so now I'll help bring it to the meeting. But it's like, and that's, I guess, their way. The guy did find a way.
Yeah.
He found his way was, I'll do the pitch in the hall because I don't feel comfortable doing it in the room. So I said, okay, you're making a step. So it's not just in your head. But the next step for you is not to give it to me, but to say it in the meeting.
Right. It's a lot less intimidating, I guess, to say it in the hallway, right? Because that fear of failure is probably a little bit less. It's only one person I got to worry about instead of a room full of people I got to worry about. So it's I can appreciate the intimidation.
You want their approval.
There.
You want they want to. You want their approval.
Yeah.
Like I get it. I mean, that is a step. He made a step that's not totally in his head. He's willing to tell me. He thinks he sees how I behave.
Yeah.
He's seen that I probably have given other people's ideas out there. Can I do that? And I credit it to the other person. So he decided to come to me because he knew that that's kind of what I do. So I was kind of being put out there as a facilitator to help people. So he kind of figured the law of attraction brought him to me because he saw that I do that. And so then I said, well, I guess I'm serving my purpose, but I would kind of pay it forward with telling him, you need to do the same thing for somebody else.
Yes. Yes.
You need to start doing this for yourself and doing it for other people. And then we'll have more people like me and you who are pushing other people's ideas so we can broaden what's going on and get more ideas out from the underground in the organization and out in the open.
That's
you pay it forward. Any way you can pay it forward, you try to pay it forward. That's right.
Well, and that's the beautiful thing about having a community, right? Like just when you get that like-minded group of people coming together, either for a shared passion, shared vision, a shared goal, but more importantly, just a shared mindset, right? Like it's incredible what can be done from just a collaboration and co-creation standpoint. So I love that there's these amazing, I would call them like, I guess, structure to how you're navigating these pieces. And I wonder, like, do you draw upon what you do musically? And I would imagine you do apply to all other areas of your life, because I imagine there's some things that you've learned through music that have given you a process that you can apply to different areas of life. And I'm not a musician per se. So I'm just curious, is there anything specific that you've taken from music that helps you live a better life? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff I do with, I mean, I'm a sound designer. And so what that means is I have analog synthesizers that I can take oscillators and take from waveforms.
Yes, yeah.
And waveforms are like triangles, square waves, sine waves.
Right.
And I've got these old Moogs, they're American synthesizer, but it's got like this telephone operator interface of all these physical wires that you can rewire the whole synth. And then change how it works without taking it apart. These are wires, kind of like a telephone operator, that you can override things and put things into different positions in the workflow. So you physically can change the workflow of the synth. And what I've done with this idea musically is in software design, we have workflows within programs. And I kind of took the idea, like on my Moog, I can take my triangle wave and throw it in an oscillator and do a thing called an attenuator and make it go reverse polarity. And I can go and make it change the steps. So step one, it usually goes 1, 2, 3, 4. I can do it from 1 to 5 to 2 to 8. So I can jump around and I can physically make it jump the normal process. And then I say, well, like when we're doing something for software design, does it make sense to actually move to this other module to do this instead of doing it sequentially, but to actually jump around and do it because I need to do that. And the musical idea of being able to move around in that flow made me say like that's technically the same kind of concept and I can apply it in my software design. And I have done that. And it has resulted in really cool things. And it's showing you that some of the flows, logical flows, because music is like math. People don't realize that there's a lot of mathematics to it. So it equates to programming very well. And so that kind of concept worked.
That's neat.
A little tricky, but it worked.
I love it though. No, but I think I mean, again, that's, well, it's also the creativity, right? Like you have to have a certain foundation of knowledge to be able to experiment like that. I mean, I guess, well, you need to understand the alphabet before you can make words, right? Like there's a certain foundational amount of knowledge, I'm sure that you just get through your life experience. But as you gain more of that knowledge, now you can really get super creative, right? Like you can really start doing new things. And I imagine that's pretty exciting too, though. Like just that idea. Like I love the idea of creation and just that idea of like I look at symphonies and I'm always amazed. Right? Like just the fact that they can take all these individual sounds.
Yeah, it's that whole creative spark.
It's just wild, right? Like just remarkable how a melody performed. Yeah, it's just, I love it. I wish I had more musical inclination.
Well, the thing I love about the symphony
music, you know?
Well, when you think about Bach and Beethoven, Chopin, and all these guys, they actually were kind of like today. I have like studios with all these devices. I can layer.
Yes.
Right. So I can layer like a big classical composers. What they do is in their head, they're able to kind of conceive that layer of all those instruments coming out at the same time. Right. Jeez. So that's really amazing because they didn't have the tools we have today. Right. No. So they were perceiving, well, here's the piano chord with this string in this key, with this bass and this other key and this voice and this other key, and they're seeing what worked all at once. Now I can actually on my multi-tracks layer things, and I can go and say, well, that works, that doesn't work, that works, that doesn't work. And so I can layer, 100, I can put like 128 tracks on top of each other, and I can build these like what I call sound paintings. And after time, you start to, as a composer, you start to know, I kind of understand why they knew what happened. Because as you start to learn the notes and you're musicians like an athlete, you know what that chord's going to do. You know what's going to happen if another note is played with it. You've heard it before. It's kind of like, so it's like that play when you're a football player. You've done that play a ton of times, you know what it is. So when you're a musician, you start to see these combinations and you know what they sound like, you know what they feel like. You know what the colors are, the different chord variations, the minor sevenths and diminished. Like you know what it does. You know what happens if you put notes on top of each other, what they end up sounding like. It's like a color. It's like a painter. When painter starts mixing paint, it turns into another color. The sounds do the same thing. When you put the different sounds on top of each other, they change into colors. And if you're perceptive of it as an artist, that's a musician, you understand what that's going to turn into. And that's what those guys ended up feeling is they could hear it because they knew what it was going to do. So they perceived it. It's very cool. But people are like, wow, that's a different mindset. If you don't have it, you can't imagine how you have it.
No. Well, that's, you can get it. Like I'm just amazed. I'm amazed by it. I just think it's a wonderful example of also just what's possible through artists and arts and just this pure form of creation. I just think it's awesome. Like I'm a writer, right? And a speaker, a storyteller, keynoter, that kind of stuff. So my acting, if you will, or projection is often just my voice and telling a good story, and because that's what I love. I love to create stories and engage people where they're at. And so for me, that's, I guess, as close as I'm getting to symphonies, but I live vicariously.
Well, you're using, you're using your vocal tone, when you give a speech. And how you do your inflection, how you say the words is similar to music.
True.
It's the same. If I patterned your voice on an oscilloscope, I could pattern it to my synthesizers and I could find patterns and I could find the ways you talk that make your pattern unique, right? So every human being's voice and the way they speak is its own pattern. Right. And it's very similar to the patterns on oscillators. And when you go and put them on oscilloscopes, you can find those patterns and you can see that is your voice as your individual. and you have a very, every human being has a unique way of speaking, and it becomes its own music.
Like
And
a
you can
footprint
use
or a
that.
fingerprint, huh?
Yeah, it's like
Right?
a fingerprint, and you can use it, and how you use it is very creative. Like when you're trying to make a point, or you change your volume, you
Yes.
change your inflection, you do all these things. It's very much like a saxophone player playing the notes. It's the same idea. Your voice is an instrument.
Right.
That's what people don't realize.
I can believe that, you know. I just maybe my range is not as much as someone doing an area, right? Like I am a little bit different, but you know, I know we're getting on the time here, but
Your
I
range
gotta
is,
ask you a question.
yeah,
I
your
gotta
range
ask you
is,
something.
yeah.
I gotta ask you something. What is your thoughts as a creative, as a
Yeah.
musician, with this whole AI thing?
I have a lot of thoughts
Because
on
you're
that.
also a programmer, right? Like you mentioned it. So
AI
like
to me
you're on
is
both
a tool.
sides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the idea, yeah, I understand both sides. Like I embrace UI AI as a tool, but
Yes.
not as the writer of the song. There are some people that want to make it write the song. I don't think it should write the song. I think it is a tool that I could
Yes.
use for workflow help.
Yeah.
An example, if I'm writing a song
Mhm.
and I've got all these different filters I could run,
Yeah.
and I make a choice, AI can do for me what AI can do is like, you know what, I got 100 different filter settings I could run. As a human being, I have to physically set that. But if I had AI go and like, give me a 30-second sample of every filter setting and let me hear those back to back and tell AI to do that for me, then I'll make the choice of which one I'm going to use.
Right.
Rather than saying, AI, go into chat GPT and find a song and clone it and make it like a song like this. That to me is not, as a musician, I would rather use AI to help me find a filter, an envelope, or help me find something that's an element of the song, but not the entire song. I use it to help me with a piece that's kind of monotonous.
Mm.
So, there's another example, like Roland created this thing called intelligent arpeggiator on their modern sense. It's an AI enabled arpeggiator that actually will go, and as you start to play chords, you say, give me an example bass line that goes with the chords I'm playing. And it will actually throw in examples. And then if you don't like it, it'll throw in multiple examples. And then if you
Wow.
like it, it'll put the example down playing with what you're playing, and then it'll let you go in and change it. Now that what that does is like there's no bass player there, and I needed somebody to play with me. So it finds a way to play with you based on how you're playing. So that's cool. But that's not actually going and saying find a song that was already written and
Mm-hmm.
copy that and make it like mine, make it into mine. That's actually working with you like a person and playing a
Mm-hmm.
bass line with you to fit something you're actually writing that's new. That's the way I
Mm-hmm.
like to use it. And other people use it to kind of clone somebody else. And I'd rather not do that.
Yeah, I appreciate your approach and how you treat it like a tool. I'm very similar. Like it's really helped me with workflows, but also doing some preliminary research at times, or even sometimes like my brain's not as clear and I just need to rewrite something that I've written just to give it a different sort of presentation. And sometimes I'll do that for the creative side of things, right? But it's just a wonderful tool. It really is. But I am concerned, like
Yeah.
I just, my friends that are in the creative space, like they're a bit nervous, right? Like even my friends that are personal trainers
Well,
and
I'm
fitness
concerned. Yeah.
professionals, you know?
Well, they're
Yeah.
concerned about it replacing the artist because the problem is there's some people that undervalue artists and will
Sure.
say, well,
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
get AI to write a song that's like
Yeah.
Purple Rain, and
Right.
it could use Prince's voice, and it could be Purple Rain 2, and it will be in that zone, and it will go and write the whole thing. And that's what artists
Wow.
are scared of is like, why
Yeah.
not let a human being still be in the room? Because the problem is that could be very successful, and they probably will be very successful. I've talked to guys who want to take Prince's voice and use it on other people's songs. They want
Sheesh.
to take Michael Jackson's voice and put it on a Prince song. Take Madonna's voice and put it on a freaking a Supreme song. Like
Yes.
to
Yeah.
do all these things, that's fine, but you got to get approval from the artist.
Right.
right? The problem I have is like, you need approval from the artist, from the person's voice. You shouldn't mind people's talents and then say it's a free resource. I think it's the same issue as sampling. When rappers
Right.
came
Oh,
with
yeah.
sampling, they initially did it and they didn't credit the artist. And then the legal world came and said, guess what? If you sample X, you got to pay the person who wrote that. And
Yeah.
I think AI will get resolved when the lawsuits happen and people say, you have to get permission to use my voice or to use my part. You can't just use it and say it's a resource that's free, because it's not. It's copyrighted, mastered, protected material, and people who wrote it need to be compensated, and that will solve some of it.
Yes. And I agree with you. And it's a bit of the Wild West right now, right? We're all just waiting to see what's going to happen. So I think, it was nice. I mean, it's not nice.
It's
My
like with
daughter's,
with
the strike, right, that just happened. My daughter's an actress, and that strike in the industry was a lot of these conversation points. It was really brought up, like, and
part
so
of it
I think
was that.
I mean, it's crazy, right? But at least now the conversation is much more present for everybody to be talking about this, to recognize that, hey, yeah, we love the tool, but I don't think we've thought it through entirely, right? Like, what happens in this situation or this situation?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want I mean, actors, you don't want your image to be reused and to not get compensated, like in the reruns and the replays. Then suddenly you're not getting any residual income. And they were trying to put something through where they would do that. And it's just like when somebody samples. If somebody samples a David Bowie Queen song and then throws different lyrics on it and says it's original, well, it's not. And he was sued. and he had to give up all the royalties. And so he did, and he gave up all the royalties because it wasn't original. So the idea is, it's the same idea. Like, if you have an actor's image, that's their secret sauce, is their image.
Yeah,
and you
is.
can't have that not be compensated.
Yes.
And I think, and then the AI is like, just the problem with the technology, just because you can do it doesn't mean it's legally acceptable. And the problem is the technology is getting beyond the legal capability.
Yes.
So just because you can do it doesn't mean that you won't get sued for doing it. And that's where some of the kids need to understand. Like, if you go and take somebody's image or voice and use it without their authority and it gets popular, you're probably going to be getting a knock on the door to a summons to a situation, and you're probably going to have to
pay. That's right. Along with the big ass cease and desist, right?
That's like, what's going to happen.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see. The next few years will be very telling, so but yeah, I appreciate you answering that, because I've always been, I'm just all my friends that are creatives, just wondering.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have to get protection. You got to hope that the law was kind of slow on sampling, but it did come in, and it is the state of the world today. You can't put out uncleared samples. If I'm an artist and I go listen to some record and I sample 30 seconds of that record and I go suddenly put it out and I don't credit the original producer of that, they will put a cease and desist on me and will take my income if it made money.
Wow.
And that's just the way it is. So there's a whole process for musicians where if I decide to use a sample, I have to note what it is, say exactly how much I took, from what source, who are the writers, who owns the publishing, and then ask if I can use it. If they give me an approval to use it, then I have to give them a percentage of the royalties. That's that world. And I think that world is what AI is going to have to live with too. They're going to have a structure that's very similar to that.
Nice thing is too, AI can build its own policing. You know what I mean? Like eventually,
but they could build it in.
Yeah.
It could be built in because it's so smart. It could say, well, what's the source? Who was the writer? Who was the producer? Who owned it? AI itself can police itself because it could find that. And so if you just say these are the rules and somebody uses it, did you get the clearance? If you get the clearance, that you understand that a percentage of this is going to go to that artist, or they're going to say, no, we don't want you to use it, so you can't use it, use something else.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's what's going to happen, in the future, and it'll be seamless, and you'll know what you can do and what you can't do.
Yeah. Gosh, It's interesting, huh? Oh man. Well, this has been I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Man, we've covered a lot of topics. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot in an hour. I love it.
Yeah, it's always fun. You kind of go where the wind blows. But
Yeah.
I do want to let people know they can check your website, that daimanuel.com. And if people go there, what do they find there?
Well, I've been blogging for 15 years. So writing content specifically around helping people achieve greater health, holistically speaking. What I mean by that is financial health, emotional health, spiritual health, physical health, as well as the big mental health piece. And so it's all content geared to help people with that. Either getting started, maybe they need to recalibrate and refocus some of their efforts, or maybe they're just looking for a little bit of entertainment as they educate themselves on different ways of doing things when it comes to life. And so there's lots of content on there, lots of links to a lot of other great resources, and to all my socials linked there as well. But if people want to connect on social media, I'm most active on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I always just say, just reach out, because I'm just a guy and I'm over here in Vancouver,
That's cool.
but I love connecting
Yeah,
with people, so it's great.
Well, that's how you do it. It's like a big Rolodex to your next opportunity. Like the way social media, I love the fact that you can connect, and then you can end up talking to somebody around the world, and then you end up being able to have like working relationships with people, and maybe you never even physically met them, and you can find like parallels and huge opportunities just by showing up. And thank you again for showing up here. And
thank you.
have a good night. Have a good holiday weekend if you celebrate it. But I'm having my turkey tomorrow.
Nice. I was going to say, well, I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
My daughter's setting it up right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter's like marinating the turkey right now. She's a big time cook. She's 23 years old, and she's got the whole. And I used to do it, and then my daughter, she said, "Guess what, Dad? Like I'm taking over." So she took it over, and I was like, "Okay." I'm doing a couple of things. A couple of dishes I do. I'm doing like 3 dishes, but she's doing a majority of everything. Including burgers. She's doing a burger.
Sounds like it's going to be an awesome night and day of celebrations and giving thanks. And listen, have a wonderful family time, because I know it's a special time of year for everyone. And I'm honored that I could be here today to have this conversation with you. So thank you.
Great. Yeah. Have a good night. And we'll get this out to you. Yeah. Like I said, we create a landing page for your audience, and they'll be able to check it on any platform they want.
Can't wait to share it out.
Bye.
I love it. Thank you so much.